why are we still in a state in this country where testosterone is just freaking declining in men? Is it, what's going on? Like,
It's environmental. In 2011, a 7-continent patient population, double-blind, placebo, randomized controlled trial came out called the Hebrew University Study. And it was 48,000 participants, and it was men on every continent. And they started in 1974, which is 3 years after I was born, and they concluded and found their findings in 2011. In 2011, it was that basically fertility was half. They also tracked testosterone, but they didn't publish it because it wasn't important to them. They were just looking at fertility, right? Free testosterone was more than half. It was like 60% now. We've got a problem. Right? But it wasn't addressed because, again, it's 2011. It's not now. We don't have the technological onslaught. We don't have EMFs. We don't have all this stuff that's going on now. But the answer to your question is the environment is contaminated. Pollution. If you live in a first world, concentrated place like Tampa, like LA, like New York, like Houston, Seattle, Chicago, Detroit, any of those places, your body is overwhelmed. Male and female.
Radiated.
Our endocrine systems are just overwhelmed.
Welcome to Full Fuel Podcast. What's up, baby?
What's up, man? Welcome back. It's good to be here, bro.
Matt Tech.
How you living today, man?
Oh, dude, full field.
Dr. Alfred Alessi, we're here. Man, I'm pumped for today. We have a great guest on the show, somebody with some high-level knowledge that they're going to really break down some really cool stuff, really high-level information. So Jay Campbell is a 5-time international best-selling author, a men's physique champion, and founder of the Jay Campbell brand and podcast. Jay is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on hormonal optimization and therapeutic peptides. Jay has dedicated his life to teaching men and women how to fully optimize their health while also instilling the importance of raising your consciousness. His catchphrase, raise your vibration to optimize your love creation, speaks directly toward his mission. Jay, it's great to have you on the show, man. We can't wait to nerd out on everything from testosterone, spirituality, everything in between. Now, I know you don't hold back from the truth on your show, and that's exactly what we want today to be like. Thanks for coming down, man.
Yeah, man. Matt and Alfred, I appreciate you guys having me here. It's going to be epic.
Yes, sir.
It is going to be absolutely epic. So I'm going to start off the first one. We obviously listen to a lot of your podcasts. So
cool,
love what you're doing. But so we truly believe your test is your testimony on the Full Field podcast. It's a brand of like what we present on our end. Yeah. But I was listening to it was probably last year, but it was with Julian Poulton. You remember that one?
Julian's a good friend of mine, man.
Dude,
amazing. That was an amazing podcast.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Epic, yeah.
So I re-listened to that one, and I was like, dude, I have to ask you a couple questions because I think this is
That's awesome, man. Nobody's ever talked to me about Julian. That's like so amazing. He's literally a living ascended master. Living ascended master.
Real. Like, I just loved the content.
You guys know he's right now in Peru, living in the outback, essentially, in the Amazon jungle, building a monastery, an enlightenment monastery.
No way.
So when did that happen? Because that wasn't something you guys talked about.
Probably 2 months after our podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he left 2 months after our podcast. Yeah,
just tired of what's happening in this country.
That's his goal. I mean, his goal is to teach enlightenment, and he's like, you can't teach enlightenment living in the modern day world. It's impossible.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, man! It is. I guess Peru's a good spot to be in.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the story of Jay Campbell and that relatability piece, because you guys talked about your story, your narrative, and then the relatability piece. And I think you built a community around that, your story. So if we could give our listeners just the behind of Jay Campbell.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me. Whenever I get a chance to talk to people who are clearly walking the path as you guys are, Julian Ponson, I mean, that's like mind-blowing. But like, it's a gift. So again, I'm humbly grateful to be here with you guys today, and of course your audience too. But I'm the oldest of 9 kids. I tell people this truth all the time, and that is that my entire family is asleep. There's no one in my family awake. On the Ancient Health podcast, before we started talking today with Courtney, she was asking me about my family, and I was like, it's the most incredible thing. My dad thinks I'm a drug dealer. They don't understand any of the things I do. I'm a complete, outlier, black sheep, whatever you want to call it or whatever. And it's like, what I've likened it to is that like souls like mine, souls like ours, souls like people listening to you guys, we come in and we are just blazing our own trail. And the most growth, from an evolution of the soul standpoint, happens when you have the most contrast. So the more in resistance that your family, your brothers and sisters, your parents, like, your close circle when you're coming up it is to you, the more opportunity it gives you for growth, right? So like I clearly knew at an early age that like we were living in the matrix. I mean, it was just, again, I tell people 6 years old, I ran out of the back of Catholic church. My dad chased me. He's like, where are you going? And I literally said to him, away from that cult. at 6, right? Wow. So it's like I was awake early, which, just tells me that I've been in this path a long time, right?
Yeah,
There's been many lifetimes probably that I've been playing this game, and I'm still coming back for whatever reason. But at that point, it was like, okay, now I'm going to go down the path of like, I want to find out what's going on here, because there's so much BS given to us, through organized religions, through politics. I mean, everything in the Matrix that's organized is obviously structured in a way to benefit, or not benefit us, but profit off of us, right? Like everything is just profit based in this reality. So it's like, I kind of figured that out at a young age, but at the same time, and you guys know this, is we got to eat, we got to pay our bills, we got to survive. We have to live and get a better life and stuff like that. And you can't get a better life if you're not eating. So, to answer the question, the backstory is, I was a high school and college athlete. I played basketball at Division II school. At the time, it was NAIA, and by the time I graduated, it was Division II. But we were a powerhouse. It was Georgia Southwestern University in Americus, Georgia, and we went to the NAIA National Championship and then the Division II National Championship 2 years in a row. And we had ton of ex-Division I guys that just flunked out of school or were bad news. You know what I mean? So like we were a legit team. Almost no Division I school team in the entire state of Georgia would even play us because they couldn't risk losing to a D2 school. Yeah. But anyway, I got a chance to go to Kansas City, which at that time was Kemper Arena, and I played like in the Final Four, and for 2 years in a row. And so then when I graduated from college, I went out with my best friend from high school, my senior year of high school, to California, and I tell people this, and a lot of people don't know this, but I got into the film and television industry, right? So I was like in the movie Forrest Gump. And,
were you really?
Yeah. So I mean, I've done a lot of crazy stuff. I saw what the Hollywood industry was about. I was also like a featured extra on 90210. So I met all those guys. But like and then I was, next thing was like modeling and all that stuff. But I was exposed to that element. Yeah. And I knew what was really going on in Hollywood. Like I've been telling people, I mean, look, I've never put this on a podcast. I'll tell you guys right now, and I feel comfortable to say this, but like I was propositioned. I was 24 years old, and I went up into a casting shoot in North Hollywood at this mansion, and I went in, and it was literally from South Georgia, right? So I'm still talking like this, but I'm a big dude and in shape and stuff like that. So like I play the role of whatever, but I mean the role is like, are you going to sleep with some casting director or producer or whatever? Which again, I was naive as hell, but that's what it was. Anyway, they came out and they gave me an outfit. They're like, try this on, and so again, I'm retarded. I put the outfit on, I go in, and then the next one's like the one of the casting directors has to see you nude, and I'm like, nude? What does that have to do with the role? And they're like, hey man, do you want the role or not? That's when the guy said that. And then I literally got right in the guy's face and I said, I mean, I was like overwhelmed and in shock, but I was like, talking like that, get you killed. Where I'm from, right? Like that's kind of what I could say. That's what I knew, right? And I was like, and he was like, I guess I'm gonna have to get killed. And he got all bowed up with me, and I just thought about just taking him out. But I was like, I'm out of here. And I left, and I went out back, and I sat in my car and drive and wherever I was in North Hollywood, and I shook for like 20 or 30 minutes. But it was at that point I knew instantly like what goes on in Hollywood. That's it. So it's like, no offense to people in Hollywood, but like almost every person who's ascended the ladder and made it has done not good things.
Dude.
They've sold their soul. They've done some really bad things. So, I mean, like, hey, man, I don't have judgment or condemnation of people and what they do in this planet, but like my soul is sovereign. I'm not selling my soul for anything. Right. So at that point, I shook for a little while, and then I called one of my buddies and said, hey man, I need to get a real job. I got to get into the world, to the workforce world. So anyway, I was obviously a good communicator, and I just naturally got into sales. And I started working started doing, direct mail business coupon sales. And then from that, I met people and I got involved with the Los Angeles Times. And I had an amazing job at the LA Times. And, to fast forward the story, at 29, I got kicked in the testicles playing basketball in a very competitive men's open league. Wow, and no idea what happened, but, checked myself out. And probably like 8 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever later, I just started feeling absolutely so run down, so broken. And so I was like, just pure, again, no, coincidences in the universe, only synchronicities. But I went to my PPO doctor that was provided to me at the time. This is in 1999 for the LA Times. And he saw me and was like, you know what? I think you've got something going on with your hormones. He's like, I'm going to refer you to an endocrinologist. And again, this is all a synchronicity, but the endocrinologist happened to be like a world-renowned, Harvard-educated endocrinologist by the name of Dr. Raymond Scruggs. And so when he saw me, he took my lab. He's like, dude, look, you got testosterone level of a hypogonadal old person, a geriatric. So he's like, I can literally put you on therapeutic testosterone, have you right as rain in 8 weeks. Now, at the time, I didn't know anything about that. I'd never done anything other than rip fuel. You know what I'm saying?
I remember that.
And so, I remember that supplement. So it's like, I was like, he's like, look, take it home, go home, discuss it with your fiance. It was my first fiance, first wife at the time. Shout outs to Kelly. And he was like, find out if she's okay with it. And then if you are, I'll put you on it. And I promise it'll be 8 to 10 weeks and you'll be amazing. So I was like, okay. So talk to her. And she's like, you're a smart guy. Yeah, let's do it. Didn't have kids. Didn't matter. So he sent me the testosterone. Funny story around my first injection, which I sometimes share with him. Literally the first time I sat there for 2 hours, like, how am I going to do this? How am I gonna do this? And my wife walked up to me at the time, or our wife to be Kelly, she walked up to me. She was like, what's the matter with you? And she just took it out of my hand and injected it into my quad. And I was like, and I realized it didn't hurt. I was like, oh, wow, I'm overcoming my injection phobia. But true story, 8 weeks later, I started feeling amazing. So I went in for my checkup with him, and he was like, okay, I can take you off. I was like, whoa.
Hell no. I want this forever.
Testosterone. This is life-changing. Yeah. So from that moment forward, I became very studious. I started reading everything I could find about it, which at the time, again, 1999, 2000, there was nothing. Yeah. There was Bulgarian strength textbooks, so you had to be able to read Russian or Bulgarian, and they have a lot of stuff on using therapeutic testosterone. Yeah. But outside of that, there was Testosterone, a Man's Guide, which came out in 2004. There was Michael Mooney and the guy that wrote Testosterone, a Man's Guide, which Nelson Virgil, who, by the way, ended up helping me with my first book. They wrote the book because they were dying of AIDS. They had an HIV at that time diagnosis, and back then they didn't know. They thought it was a death sentence. Yeah. So they were experimenting with testosterone, growth hormone, Decoded, and all these different drugs to stay alive. Yeah. And so that was the only information out there. So over the next 10 years, I was reading underground forums, anything I could get to find out more about testosterone. And of course, at that same time period, I was also experimenting with peptides. Yeah. I was experimenting pretty much with everything. I was a human guinea pig. I was, like I say, an OG biohacker. Yeah, before anybody even knew what a biohacker meant. Yeah. Right? Like I tell people I started using ipamorelin in 2004, and they just look at me like, what? Yeah. So literally think about that. 20 years I've been using peptides. Yeah. Right? The average people don't even know anything about peptides still. Yeah. So anyway, that was all a blessing for me. And then eventually, one of my good friends, who's a very famous person, I'll just say his name, Mike Cernovich. If you guys know him from the conservative side of things, he's like a big conservative influencer. He's got millions of people to follow him. But we were close friends, and he's like, look, dude, you got to write a book on testosterone. And I was like, bro, I'm not a doctor. It's typical brainwash. Oh, I can't do that. Yeah. And so I basically wrote an email, to Rick Collins, who now happens to be a very close personal friend, the famous bodybuilding steroid attorney, and said, hey, look, if a non-medically licensed person wrote a book on therapeutic testosterone, what would be the risks? And being the good attorney that he was like, whoa, if a senator got a bug up their ass, they could come after you and blah, blah, blah. So at that point I was like, you know what, I'm shelving this. But I also sent it to Nelson Virgil, who didn't know me from Adam. But I had obviously read his book, Testosterone, a Man's Guide, and Built to Survive. And I was just like, hey, look, man, here's a white paper that I wrote on testosterone. I'd like you to read it and tell me if it's good enough that I could write a book out of it. Because, again, I had never written a book, and I didn't think I was even worthy of writing a book, right? But so he didn't respond. I shelved it. 4 months later, out of the blue, which I still remember like yesterday, I got an email from him, and he's like, I don't know who you are, but this is unbelievable. You got to publish this. Yeah. I want to help you, blah, 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 blah. Here's my number. Call me. So I called him, and I told him what Rick said, and he was like, who cares about Rick? He's like, I'm on panels with the FDA. He's like, men need this information. So at that time, it was 2014, and I always say, giving him credit, I say, stepping on the shoulders of giant. He mentored me. We published the book. It could have published in 2014, but we took a little bit longer. Mike was actually involved at one time, and then him and I had kind of going different ways in a business and stuff. So anyway, the book came out in November of 2015. That was the first book, which was the original. Before that, it was called the Definitive Testosterone Therapy Manual, and then we spelled it MAN capital, right? So manual.
Nice. If you want to hear your question answered live on the show, submit it to ask@fullfuel.com. Check out the Optimizers program where we build max muscle, improve longevity, and get guys freaking shredded so that they can crush it at life for as long as possible.
Live full fueled. Live beyond limits, baby.
But that was an awesome book, and then that allowed me to meet people like you guys and, all sorts of researchers. And then I started going to all the medical conventions and stuff like that. And then, fast forward to this day, I've written 8 books, right? Yeah. And I've written books on peptides.
This thing is a freaking powerhouse.
Yeah, and honestly,
an amazing
what's funny about that book is obviously it still stands the test of time. But like last night, I was talking to one of the doctors that helped me write it. We were just we were supposed to do our doctors roundtable, but we just canceled it because 2 of the docs were sick. Yeah. So we're just like, we'll just bullshit with each other and talk for a couple minutes. But we were talking about redoing that book. And he looked at me square up and he's like, bro, why would we redo the book? It's 80% right still.
Yeah.
So it's like, we've learned things in 6 years. Because that book was actually written in 2017, published in March of 2018. But, forward it now, 6 years and it's 80% right. What's wrong in that book is the female stuff because we've evolved that knowledge. There's a little bit about estrogen inhibition that we've also evolved. Yeah. But everything else when it comes to utilizing and dosing therapeutic testosterone has nailed it. And it will never change.
Yeah. I mean, you can see this freaking book, dude. I have bookmarked the shit out of it because I use a lot of this on myself and,
of course.
And, recommendations.
And almost all physicians, by the way, who are knowledgeable, which as you know is a small percentage, use that book. Right. That's the resource guide. Yeah. And truthfully, and this is a blessing because I wasn't a doctor, the smartest doctors in the world have all told me to a man and a woman that they were like, we could never have written this because we would all fight with each other over, ridiculous stuff. Yeah. Where you as a non-practicing physician didn't care. You just put all the science together and said, hey, here it is. Nice. Do what you want. I've been using testosterone for 20 years and this is my findings. Yeah. Whereas doctors would just fight. It would be like, my penis is bigger than your penis. Little ego game. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. They would just literally be fighting over the most stupid, inconsistencies of the science and the research. That's not evidence-based or whatever, and so it never would have been published. Yeah. So they all say it took a non-practicing physician to publish a book of that magnitude.
I mean, dude, I'm a doctor, but I've learned more from you in this book than I probably did about testosterone in chiropractic school, right? And so tell us, bro, like, I mean, you've been doing this for 20 years now, 10 years since that book started. Yeah. Why are we still in a state in this country where testosterone is just freaking declining in men? What's going on? Like,
it's environmental. In 2011, a 7-continent patient population, double-blind, placebo, randomized controlled trial came out called the Hebrew University Study, and it was 48,000 participants, and it was men on every continent. And they started in 1974, which is 3 years after I was born, and they concluded and found their findings in 2011. In 2011, it was that basically fertility was halved. Wow. They also tracked testosterone, but they didn't publish it because it wasn't important to them. They were just looking at fertility, right? Free testosterone was more than half. It was like 60% down. We've got a problem, right? Mm-hmm. But it wasn't addressed because, again, it's 2011. It's not now. We don't have the technological onslaught. We don't have EMFs. We don't have all this stuff that's going on now. But the answer to your question is the environment is contaminated.
Pollution.
If you live in a first world, concentrated place like Tampa, like LA, like New York, like Houston, Seattle, Chicago, Detroit, any of those places, your body is overwhelmed. Male and female.
Radiated.
Our endocrine systems are just overwhelmed. I told Courtney, on the podcast this morning, because she asked me point blank, she's like, is there a way to optimize hormones without using therapeutic testosterone? And I said, in maybe 1% of the population, right? Because again, it's the biggest tool in the tool belt. Yeah. And the issue is, like, even if you do everything right and you're super anal retentive and you block all the EMF and you have you sleep in a Faraday cage, right? Like, you do all these things, you're still, when you go out in public, not protected. So it's like, if you're using therapeutic testosterone, you're using therapeutic hormone or peptides, you're using a low dose of growth hormone, you're taking, metformin or dihydroberberine, all these different things, like, then you are somewhat protected versus when you're just natural, you're not protected.
Right.
And so that's where we've gotten in today's society. You either have to be a freak genetically and still an outlier, right? Because even if you're a freak genetically, you're still being bombarded. Yeah. So it's like, you're either a freak genetically or an outlier, or you're using hormones, or you're destroyed. Yeah. That's where we're at. Yeah. And again, look out. Go around and look outside. Yeah. Go to the mall. Go to any outdoor large place. Go to a theater and look at people. Yeah. People are done. Yeah. They're physically fat. Yeah. They're exhausted. They're insulin dysregulated or insulin resistant, metabolically dysregulated. It's insane.
So this, I got a question on this then, because this is pretty interesting stuff. Now that I'm thinking about it, based on what you're saying, right? Yeah. Is it that less people are having sex? Like, there's less sex going on for the ability to reproduce, because of what's happening in today's age.
100%.
Okay, so it's not whereas like we're having the same amount of sex and that we have lower fertility just because the man can't produce that level of testosterone with that sperm count. It's dramatically because people are like that much or just aren't having sex because they're like pretty much
they're
the
not
libido's
capable
gone.
of having sex.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have like erectile dysfunction is so prevalent in society now today. Like almost most men over the age of 45. So put it this way, and again, I talked this earlier today. If you're, and this is none of us, but if you're a man 45 and older and you have a belly, your dick doesn't work.
Yeah.
You are metabolically disranged. It's like I say
like that shit again because that's our audience.
No, if you're 45 or above and you have a giant belly, you cannot get your dick to work naturally. Now, granted, most of those guys are taking the blue or the red pill, right? They're taking Cialis or Viagra. Now, here's something too. I'm going to blow your listeners' minds away. And again, no one studies this, and this is just my theory, but I'm telling you, if you looked into it, you would find out it's not a theory. The majority of heart attacks in America today that happen to men who are fat, again, metabolically dysregulated, are from taking a high dose of Viagra and they stroke out.
Wow.
Think about that.
Yeah. They're trying to force something that just isn't physiologically happening.
I said that about a year and a half ago on some podcast, and I had a physician reach out to me who found me, who listened to me, indirectly some way, and he said, that was one of the most profound statements that have ever been made because I can actually prove that scientifically. And I was like, well, yeah, it just stands to reason. He's like, yeah, but nobody's talking about that because
then they're going to get off it the money.
If you take a 100 milligram tab of Viagra, which a fat guy, that doesn't even do anything. They take 3 of them. Dude, first off, as a guy who uses a surgically precise dose of Cialis, I've experimented with 50 milligrams of Viagra, and it makes you feel loopy because, again, it's occluding vascularity, right? So it's like you can go from like feeling, wow, I got a raging heart on, to like flaccid and feeling like, oh my God, what's going on with me? So imagine taking 300 milligrams, which is what fat guys are doing.
Crashing.
So exactly. So you're basically 50-50 going to die of a heart attack to have a heart on. Yeah. But again, hey, if you're that dude and you can't get a heart on and your wife is like going to leave you. Yeah, so that's what's happening. But it's like, to go back to what you were just saying, think about this. This is how crazy it is. It's like the average guy who's going through this experience, who's not having sex, who can't get an erection, they don't know they have a testosterone.
As always, this episode is brought to you by Nutritious, convenient optimized superfood nutrition powered by nootropics, designed to elevate your physical and mental performance no matter what life throws at you. Nutritious has been proven to improve cognition, boost memory, and speed up mental and physical processing. Alfie, tell everyone where they can get it.
Yep, head on over to newtup.com to experience these benefits for yourself and live beyond limits today.
They don't have anywhere to get the information. The doctors are not trained on this. It's not standard practice. It's or standard
we'll talk about that because that's one of my questions. What is that sign? So if you were to educate somebody, what is that sign that they should be seeing?
The number one sign of a testosterone deficiency is brain fog.
Brain fog.
Yeah. And again, how is it diagnosed? It's not. They go to a doctor. And look, and for most men, we're taught to fall on our swords, bring home the bacon. Right? Like, we're not going to tell anybody that we have a sexual or that we have a testosterone deficiency because most guys are like, nah, bro, my machinery works. I'm good.
It's all good.
Yeah, right.
Everything's good, right? But it's like, usually it takes the woman because he's not banging her.
It's not satisfied.
Or she's thinking he's cheating on her because he's not having sex with her because he can't get an erection. So then they get a doctor. Absolutely. And then they get a doctor involved. But then, again, they're going to a PPO doctor, an HMO doctor, 100%. A family doctor who knows nothing.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? So then, but what they do is they make it worse, right? Because they prescribe an SSRI and a pink or blue pill.
Yeah.
Both of which don't attract or address the root cause.
Yeah.
So now it just gets worse, and we know the SSRIs actually further exacerbate hormone deficiencies, right? So this it's a vicious cycle or loop that cannot be fixed until they get smart enough to find somebody like me to listen to a podcast like this and to seek outside help, because you're not going to find any help in the standard care practice and insurance medical practice.
And like you always talk about this, man, and I want you to elaborate. Is like you always talk about like the difference between optimization and replacement.
Exactly.
Right? Like, we can replace your testosterone to a basic level where you're within reference range, which who the hell's coming up with these numbers anyway?
Exactly.
Or like you say, is like, how do I optimize that shit to be Dude, I don't want to be replaced to like normal, right? Like you want to be living above average, right?
So, dude, that's the best question you could ask me because we were talking about that earlier today too. And no one's ever asked me this. This is like a perfect frame of thought for me. But, dude, think of this. So there are now 3 oral testosterone, FDA-approved testosterone formulations. One of them is called Jatenzo. One of them is T-Landy. And I don't know what the other one is. It doesn't matter. But literally to what you just said, they're worthless because they will take a man who has, again, the average guy, 60 to 80 to 100, right?
Yeah.
And remember, for your listening audience, I know you guys know this, but for your listening
total?
audience, yeah, exactly. And that's a meaningless number, right? Because free is all that matters, right?
Yeah,
we
yeah.
only want to measure what is unbound and usable by the body, right?
Yeah,
So
100%.
bound testosterone is usually what is total testosterone. But anyway, to not rabbit hole too much, there's 3 companies that make 3 FDA-approved products, which, by the way, happen to be the most expensive delivery systems in the marketplace too. So, right. So big pharma's making their money, but it will take a man who's at 60 or 80 total, 5 free to 250 to 300, which as you know, is just tiny bit above the low range, which is already compressed due to obesity, due to the environmental onslaught. And so they become normal.
Yeah.
But who wants to be normal?
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, you still feel like absolute dog shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They feel, I mean, literally you go from 200 or I'm sorry, 75 to 250, you're dog shit. That's not an improvement. But again,
Doesn't change
those guys that prescribe those oral supplements, and I know a lot of doctors that do, they're going to say to us or to you or to me, they'll be like, yeah, but this keeps me outside of the auditing of the state medical licensing boards, right?
Yeah.
Because it's still in the range. Whereas like if you give them an optimized level, as you know, sometimes they're going to fall outside of the range.
Scared though.
Exactly.
They're scared.
It's all scared. Yeah. But sometimes they fall outside of the range. But again, the range, you already said it before we started rolling, the ranges are made up.
means jack shit.
It's completely a farce. Yeah. I was taught by the godfather of hormone optimization, Dr. John Chrysler, may he rest in peace. You know, he offed himself, unfortunately, like 5 years ago now. But he said, Jay, there's a twofold goal of hormone optimization therapy, and that is balance and joy. Do you feel balanced and are you joyful? If you feel balanced and are you joyful, it doesn't matter how high your testosterone levels are, right? Because again, in the absence of symptoms and side effects, who cares?
Yeah.
That's
Right?
powerful.
And the other issue, though, is that, and you know, this is important to talk about with your audiences. We never, ever want to block estrogen when we're using therapeutic testosterone.
Yeah,
This
talk
is
about
like
that,
the most insane bodybuilding
Because it's
Can I clarify something real quick?
It's protective, right?
So
Yes.
bookmark that real quick. But
Yes.
before that,
Yes.
So like just to clarify,
Sure.
oral, because for purpose and education
For
of
sure.
everyone and myself,
Absolutely.
you do not recommend oral. You subcutaneous mainly for testosterone, and that creates more bound testosterone. Through the subcutaneous route, not the oral. Am I corrected on that?
Somewhat. But just to clarify for your audience, because
Yep.
it's important, there are 2 delivery systems that men should use. Women, there are 3.
Okay.
The 2 delivery systems that men should use are obviously injectable, which is the standard, tried and true, used for 80 years.
Yep.
The problem with injectable solutions is a couple of things which are important to mention. Make sure you're using a compounded pharmacy because the retail versions of these testosterone things have cottonseed oil and other GMO particulates that are
Inflammatory.
stabilizers,
Yeah.
which cause horrible anaphylactic reactions, can cause allergies, can make people sick. I mean, they're horrible. Like literally Shearing and all the main pharmaceutical manufacturers still put cottonseed oil in their testosterone preparations. So make sure you're using a compounding pharmacy that, you know, has a stabilizing non-GMO product to stabilize it. And there are plenty. You can use MCT oil, you can use grapeseed. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you know make it very thin and very not viscous so that it won't go through the injection. But if you inject, the best, absolutely most optimal, because again, when we inject, we want to mimic the body's natural production as close as possible, right? So we want to go daily, but that's not reasonable. Most people are not going to inject themselves 7 days a week. If you're a business person or executive or a traveler, you're not going to be carrying 7 needles in your freaking right? It's just not practical. So the next best thing is to go every other day. Now, if you go every other day, it's like 3 shots a week, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever. Maybe you'll have a 2-day break at the end. But if you do that, you're going to mimic the half-life of the testosterone ester.
It's that drip kind of
Exactly.
approach.
So the ester that most people use is either, especially in the West, is cypionate or ananthate, and they're very, very similar. So you got a half-life of anywhere from like 24 to 48 hours. So it's like if you're injecting every other day, you're constantly like this.
Got it.
Now, when guys are injecting twice a week, or at worst is once a week, they're crashing their testosterone every 3 or 4 days. Yes.
Nuts.
And so their body acclimates to that. They get all sorts of symptoms and side effects. They're never balanced. They're never optimized.
Gotcha.
Those are the guys that have high sex hormone binding globulin. Okay. You know, they're always chasing laboratory range numbers, and they're never optimized.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Now, to answer your question, the oral versions don't work in men because they're too weak. Yeah, so they'll take a guy from like a super low level into a quote unquote barely over normal, and then the docs will say, "See, it worked," but it's not effective because you're not feeling optimal.
Right.
Yeah,
They're just reading the laboratory ranges, right? So the other one though that's important and what I use is the transscrotal application. So basically, it's a cream, and you put it at the base of your scrotum. And the reason you put it at the base of your scrotum is because it's 8 times more permeable than any other skin location. Now, even more amazing is, and again, this shows you how close men and women are, the clitoral head, so the tip of the clitoris, the skin permeability is the same as the scrotum. So for women, exactly, when women take too much androgens, their clitoris becomes a penis.
Gross,
Literally. I mean, again, I tell people this all the time. The difference between men and women is the amount of testosterone in utero that this fetus
that promotes
was exposed
the growth
to.
of
That's
that
literally all it is. There's
Yeah.
no difference. There's no difference in men and women. No, but it's true. There's no difference in men and women physiologically other than the amount of testosterone or estrogen in utero. 100%. A woman becomes a woman because they're exposed to more estrogen, and a man becomes a man when they're exposed to more testosterone. Now, to get you guys even more freaked out and to start understanding like this whole trans nonsense.
Let's go.
The reason that these kids and young people today are confused sexually is because they don't have enough testosterone that they're exposed to in utero. Whoa. So when you don't have enough, and I mean like
you talked
nothing,
about this on Ben Pakulski's show.
I did.
That episode.
So when they're not exposed to testosterone in utero, they don't have sexual identification. They can't identify as male or female. So again, this is all hormonal. I've told people this, that the whole trans thing is a farce, that it's all misinformation. It's literally a lack of testosterone in utero. Now, anybody could prove this. This is simply verifiable. Now, obviously, all of the PC police are not going to ever agree to this and say I'm insane, but it's very simple to measure this biologically. And so this is leading to the problem that we have today. This is the sexual confusion, people saying they want to change their sex because they don't feel, I mean, think about this. If you're a dude and you're 5 and you tell your mom and dad that you want to become a woman, it's because you don't feel like a man. You don't have testosterone circulating freely through your veins. And so you start questioning, well, maybe I'm a woman. And then, of course, you look at the PC nonsense that they're feeding our kids and you say, oh, well, it's okay. You can transition. The state will pay for it. That's where we're at. It's insane. But this is all easily proven biologically. Now, why is this happening? It's happening because, again, there's so much birth control in the water supply. I've said this to, I didn't say this, but Dr. Anthony J. from Estro Generation, who's a good friend of mine, he said this on a podcast with me in 2018. He's like, look, and it's in his book. Again, Estro Generation is a book that you guys should definitely read that book. That book will literally teach you guys so much. But if you put a male fish into North American aqueducts, freshwater streams, rivers, even salt estuaries, they become female within one year. 12 months, the male fish becomes female.
There's so much
when
hormonal corruption by the chemicals.
Exactly. So when you understand that that's what's happening to biological sentient life, both humans, animals, and mammals, this is what's happening. That's why men are weaker. Look, I just saw this post on Twitter the other day, but they were showing NBA basketball centers 25 years ago to the centers of today, like Wembanyama, or that other guy that plays for the skinny kid that played at Gonzaga.
Yeah.
But that's the difference of what I'm talking about. They
Shaq
don't have testosterone in utero that we had 25 or 30 years ago. So they're skinnier. They have weaker bone density. So it's like, it's very simple that you can see the species. It's essentially a transmogrification of the species. And so people are becoming weaker and less hormone balance.
And
it's simple.
Probably won't get into this on the show, but I think you and I can subscribe on the same page that how much of that is like a plan or part of
agendas
that are bigger than everything.
I have my tinfoil hat out in the car. But I mean, look. It used
keep
to be
us weak and
it used to be that people would say to me like, "Look, man, it's a byproduct, right?" And I'd be like, "Maybe." But now it's not a byproduct.
No.
I mean, I can show you
what's a controllable species.
100%.
A weak man, right?
I mean, look, I talk about this in the group every Tuesday night. Like, when you get to a level of awareness of like what's going on, you realize that everything is densities, right? Like, first density is inanimate material. Very important thing when I learned when I went to Peru in 2019 is that everything is conscious. This table is conscious. It barely vibrates, but it's conscious. You get the second, that's first density, right? You get the second density and you're at plants and animals. They're conscious. Our plants they've done all those tests, the Muccio test with the plants where like if you give it love, it grows and sprouts, right? Music, all that stuff, right? Wow. Same thing with animals. We all know from our animals, right? Unconditional love is when we get into the exposure of our dog wagging its tail when we come home, right? So that's second density. Third density is us. Okay, we're humans. Fourth density is what we don't see or understand. The fourth density would be beings. Exactly. We can't comprehend it, but basically beings who would be biphasic. Literally, and what I mean by that is they become energy or physical. But because where they're vibrating at, to come into our realm or into this existence, you just said energy and frequency, they would have to step down just to get here and exist in our density because they're vibrating, and think of it really as oscillating. It's torsion at that level. So it's like when you start looking at humanity, I mean, I shouldn't say humanity, but creation from levels of density. Then like, of course it's an overt plan to keep the third density humans stupid and meat or food or fuel or whatever. And we're not even talking about like what we really are for them is fuel. It's like we're psychic fuel for these things. That's why, if we get into the sex trafficking and the organ trafficking and the adrenochrome harvesting and all this stuff, this is all because it's a fuel source for different density beings. Again, whether you want to call them reptilians, demons, grays, there's so many different names for them. What they used to call them, the Arabs called them jinn, the jinn. There's so many names for these beings, right? But it's like they're not in our dimension. They're not in our realm. We don't understand them. They take energetic form and physical form. When they step down, they can't step down very much.
But they can walk between.
Exactly. The whole reason that people can't find or prove that UFOs exist is because they're not in our reality.
Can't see them. Yeah.
When they come into our reality, it's a blip in time. They're literally like generating a torsion field variance to show up. But if you went to touch it or you went to find it, it's gone because it's not actually in this realm, right? But they do appear and people see them. Right. And when you were talking about people that are abducted, that's exactly what happens. The energy of the life form, which is all what we are, is just energy. We're energy at base essence. These meat suits, right, allow us to move around and stuff in this density, but we're basically energy, souls, spirits. And so when the beings from the different densities come in and they abduct them, they're taking their energy. And so that's why people move through walls or they move through roofs or they go into ships or whatever it is they experience. It's their energy. Energetic form that's leaving. It's the physical body stays. It's
just a shell.
Exactly.
A
meat suit.
Always say.
We're meat suits.
The shell.
We're meat
suits.
suits. We're literally meat
but
suits.
we got to protect those. Like, I mean, I'm a big faith believer, and I'm like, dude,
100%.
if I'm not protecting the shell that was given to me and I was blessed
You're
with,
more
man,
of a target,
bro.
What?
100%.
You're here for a limited time. I want to protect the
shell. The physical body is the most important thing we have in third density. If you don't protect it, you don't appreciate it, you don't love it, you don't train it, you don't eat it, feed it the correct fuel sources, then you literally have no shot of connecting with God.
Absolutely.
None. I mean, people get mad at me because they're like, oh, so you're saying that a fat person can't be spiritual? And I'm saying that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you want to connect to source consciousness, 100%. To God, to creation energy, you cannot be comorbid, sick, 10 vaxes, 6 boosters, morbidly obese, inflamed. You can't. It's not possible. No, and the ancients taught us this, but this has all been forgotten. And again, this dark element, this parasitic energy that's attempting to, circumnavigate all of us now and create whatever it is. They're creating a transhumanist world. That's what they want to do, right? It's a transhumanist world. The singularity, man-machine merge, make robots. It's ridiculous. But if you don't choose that path, you realize that, like, no, man, we're like an organic biologic species that God gave us power. God gave us this creation. He gave us this power. He gave us this meat suit, this structure, the shell. Like, you got to utilize it and beloved it and trust it and like know that this is the only thing you have at this time and space right now.
This is something that is super. I want to just touch on because you're a girl dad too. So I got 3 girls. And one of the biggest things for me that resonates with that is that the modeling perspective of that all. And if I'm not modeling this meat suit correctly, what are my daughters gonna pick, right? Exactly, and I'm like, hell no! Like, I gotta make sure I'm modeling that correctly, dude, in this, because it is absolutely, I'm casting that energy on a daily basis. There's 7, 6, and 4 right now, but I want to make sure I'm right. Yeah, like, I don't want to play any games. Yeah. And so that was something big for me that like absolutely resonates because like my daughters are going to have a choice.
That's right, dude. That's right.
Thanks so much for listening to part 1 of this Full Fueled podcast. If you like what you heard, tune in next week at the same time to catch up on part 2. Thanks.